Hey, what's going on, Jurks? Another big night on the channel. We're broadcasting, I believe, on two channels, Carl Steinbeck's channel, as well as the Young Jurks, as usual. It's going to be a big night. There was a lot happening today in court. You might have seen the Aiden Carney broadcast. We tried to help. We tried to put it up there from the Zoom today, but the court muted it. The motion to dismiss with Betterow and Bradle, we were all geared up to watch that. And we broadcast it for a full hour. I was sitting there waiting for the court to take it off mute, and they would not do it. They would not do it. We had inside people. We had people calling the court, and they just would not unmute it. Transparency in Massachusetts courts. That's what's going on. But we did get to see the Karen Reed hearing today. And I'm very excited because we have a great guest here tonight. He's a former prosecutor. He was an assistant district attorney. He's done military law. He's got lots of military experience and criminal defense. He is a criminal defense attorney. He still does military law, but he also does a lot of criminal defense. He's a very serious guy. I'm very excited that he's chosen to come back, get on the show. Criminal defense attorney, Carl Steinbeck here, going to answer some questions. Make sure you follow him. If you're not following him, if you're watching on the Young Jurks channel, make sure you give him a follow, a subscribe tonight on YouTube. We have it pinned at the top of our chat right now. His website is steinbecklaw.org. If you ever need some help, you know where to find him. He's in Texas, I believe. Let's find out where he actually practices too. So anyone ever needs any help. And tonight we're going to talk to him about the Karen Reed case and some of these motions and the digital evidence. He's big on digital evidence. He was just talking to me about that. Let's bring him up. Attorney Carl Steinbeck, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Mike. Glad to join you.
Very happy to have you back. Where do you practice law? So if people ever need a criminal defense attorney, where can they seek your services?
Sure. Well, I just recently relocated with my wife here in San Antonio. So I just have an office stood up now down here, and it was up in the Dallas Metro. So we're down here now. And yes, I am taking on civilian cases as now in the future. Very limited in what I want to practice. So I am a retired judge advocate from the Army. And so I want to really only get into cases that really cry out for justice, that really need somebody to go in there and make sure things are done right. So that's what I plan to do. And I also plan to stay on the podcast, cover different crimes cases that also cry out for justice, as we've seen here with the Karen Reed case. So that's what I intend to focus on.
Excellent. And I'm very glad to have you back. You've got your own YouTube channel that we're broadcasting this on, as well as the Young Jurks. We got two streams going on, which I love. I love to be simulcasting so people can follow and like. Please make sure you follow Carl as well tonight. So you've been covering some other cases, but you have started to get into the Karen Reed case. Did you get a chance to watch some of the video from today?
Yes, I did, Mike. And it's very, very interesting to learn those kind of details. We hadn't heard about the jury tampering type allegations before, so we learned a little bit more about that. We're hearing totally different things from the prosecution and defense, but overall, I do believe that you know, I always look to see which side I think is on the side of justice. And overall, I do see some errors and omissions by the defense at times, but overall, I think the facts of the case are definitely in favor of the defense.
Excellent. What types of facts do you think favor the defense at this point?
Well, from what I'm looking at it, rather than just looking at the credibility of witnesses, I think if you have digital type evidence, you have the physical type evidence with the rear tail light and all that kind of stuff paints a picture, and it gives you the digital details of a photo, for example. And those kind of things just really show you what happened. And so if you look at, for example, the tail light, there's discrepancies on the tail light. And when I look at the photographs or the video, I should say, of the car being loaded up on the tow truck, That is not what you see later. You know, it's a very minor little piece that's missing on the back tail light, and then you look at it later, and then it's like supposedly 47 pieces they had to reconstruct, a much bigger section that's gone. So something happened between the time it was parked at there where Karen left it that morning and how it turned out when it's being brought into evidence. So who did it? We don't know, but there's also suspicious activity of what's going on there at the Sallyport area. There's you know, we have the ATF agent coming by there at 1:30 in the morning. That's highly suspicious activity. Why would he be doing that? And they've been out drinking and whatnot. It's just very, very odd behavior. Then you look at some of the digital evidence as well. And the fact that John O'Keefe was elevated to 3 levels is very, very telling indeed, because Karen, we know, was already gone by that time. So somebody took his phone after he was struck and they went in the house, and then you have the uh, Google search by Jen McCabe talking about how long to die in the cold at 2:27 in the morning. So I mean, those are really just explosive type of details that really spell exoneration for Karen Reed. And so, you know, you wonder, it's like, well, how come the prosecution doesn't get it? You know, this is sort of like very clear to me that the kind of bodily injury also that John O'Keefe had does not align and comport with anything having to do with a vehicle strike. Okay. They just do not, you don't need a medical expert to explain that. Okay. It's just so clear cut to me that it's just very much not consistent with anything. It's more consistent with somebody getting beat up and a dog attacking them, right? That's not a motor vehicle. And so any juror that's going to look at this and think that, you know, Karen is the one that caused his death in conjunction with him dying from the cold, it's just not, it's just such a far-fetched stretch. But you know what happens is, usually what you see is that you have law enforcement that doesn't come in there with an open mind and look to see what other possible avenues of truth on the crime scene there are. Then you also look at the first ones that get to the scene sort of describe the narrative, and Jen helps feed them the information to get to this narrative, and they never back off it. So no matter how much reality hits them in the face, no matter how much forensic detail, digital detail type stuff hits them in the face, they still stick to the script. And that's what I see time and time again in criminal cases. And so they never stop back and think, hey, maybe we got the wrong suspect here, right? No one ever came in there and treated it as a crime scene. They just treated it as like, oh, hey, she hit him, she killed him, she took off. She was in angry mode. And then you look at the when you look at then the credibility of the witnesses as well. I mean, they got some major gaping holes in the testimony of these prosecution witnesses. You have, you know, Jen McCabe's all over the map, and what she's saying what happened, and it's how very much to her benefit to try to put words in Karen's mouth, right? So that's very much going to help point the finger at Karen, and it takes the finger off her, right? And other people that she's friends and family members with. So, and then when the fact of the matter is that she has, as it's been alleged in affidavits from the forensic evaluation of her phone, that she actually tried to erase the data of that search about how long it takes to die in the cold. That was at 2:27 in the morning, mind you. Just Karen was, you know, half awake and or excuse me, half asleep in bed at that time, right? Until she got awoken by Jen McCabe. So Jen McCabe's activity in this is so suspicious, calling her up and saying, hey, you know, why don't you come over here first and we can go look for John and all this kind of stuff. I mean, like, why would she even tell her to go back to the residence and stuff like that, and not just call them up there at the residence and say, hey, we got something going on? And then, you know, she doesn't supposedly um, call the Alberts there at the house to say, hey, John's out in your yard, get out here. And then, you know, we have the fact that the Alberts never go outside to see what's going on, and he just went to a police funeral down in New York City the day prior. I mean, it's just so strange and bizarre. You can't even look at this and have any degree of confidence in anything the government's telling you. And then you look at the way different things were done with their cell phones, what was going on with Higgins and him trying to download certain stuff. And then his phone and Brian Albert's phone disappear right before their preservation order comes out. So all this kind of stuff adds up to extremely, extremely suspicious behavior that indicates knowledge or involvement, if you look at it from a neutral standpoint. And if that's going on, what do you have? Why would they be doing that if Karen Reed was guilty of this, right? So that's the other thing you got to compare it to. It's like, what did Karen do that's so highly suspicious that you don't take from one of these other sources, right? Independently, her actions, it makes sense that she would have taken off if she's frustrated because John doesn't come back out of the house, right? They had this on again, off again type of relationship. They're also been drinking, and she's just thinking, hey, he doesn't have a common decency and courtesy to let me know, come back outside. So she's just like a lot of people do. You just take off, right? So, and then you look at this whole thing about, did the car get reversed at 24 miles an hour or not? Was it the suspending tires if she did that? But even if, let's say you take the state's premise that she backed up the car and John was not able to avoid getting hit and he's laying there dying in the snow. Okay, let's just take that as a premise. Then you have these people that are driving by and don't see anything, even the snowplow guy. I mean, none of this prosecution theory adds up, and yet they'll sit there and litigate it and litigate it. I mean, even this habeas court action to federal court, they got the attorney general involved from Massachusetts. So all of these guys are circling the wagons around, sticking with the script, sticking with the narrative. We see no evil, we see no wrong by anybody else other than Karen Reed. So it's just really isn't a good eye opener, though, Mike, to let citizens that follow this see that what I've been saying on my channel frequently is that the general populace has no idea how political law enforcement is and how in the justice arena in criminal settings. And by political, I do mean also that includes corruption, right? So
People
you
do
have
favors and cover-ups, covering up for your friends. It
right,
happens all the time.
right, and a lot of it, I would say a lot of it, even I'll tell you, is this confirmation bias, right? So what
Yeah.
I've always said is like the first person that goes to law enforcement and makes a report, their word is golden. They're never looked at as a suspect. They're never considered, hey, maybe they had some axe to grind. Maybe that's a guilty type thing to do, is go and report and rat on somebody else when you're actually the one that did it. I see that a lot. And so, and then they just get confirmation bias. I mean, a lot of times I don't even think that the law enforcement types are consciously trying to just get the wrong person, right? It's just sort of like, I guess it would be more like along the lines of confirmation bias united with incompetence and lack of drive to really find truth and justice in a case.
I like the term water seeks its level. It's kind of like the same thing, the confirmation bias. You just kind of stick with what you are familiar, what's natural to you. You just don't even the way that we, pick products, you know what I mean? It's just in
Right.
general, like we have this, what car you drive, that's a bias. You somehow chose that car, over another car. Police do similar things. It's just like a subconscious decision.
Right. And then you look at the fact that, how stuck on this stupid mentality is the government. And you look at how they thought they could prop this thing up as a credible second-degree murder case. It is an absolute joke of a case for second-degree murder, number one. And that was actually confirmed by the jurors when they said, everyone agreed this was not proven. There was no single juror that thought the state had met its burden of proven second-degree murder beyond a reasonable doubt. And yet the state is still stuck on this, and they're still going to try to prop this up as a second-degree murder case. And they just don't, they're not going to let it go. And so this motion to dismiss, the way, from my experience, I don't know Judge Canone at all, but from my reading of her and from my just general being in and out of the courtrooms across different states and countries, I can just tell you that she's not going to dismiss a case like this where you have a police officer, especially that's been supposedly murdered by the accused. And so it doesn't matter what they're presenting here today. To me, it's all something that should be done by the defense. And so, but in the end, what's going to happen? This is never going to be an appellate issue, Mike, because she's going to get acquitted. Okay. I don't think this federal judge is going to step in there. I think you'd like to find some law to support getting this thing squashed and crushed, and get this thing off the books and out of the public eye, because it's such a, like I say, a scandalous embarrassment for the state of justice in Massachusetts. But in the end, I think that what's going to happen is they'll get another acquittal on this kind of case. And so, with that being said, these kind of motions will never create an appellate issue that will actually turn out to being reversible error if there was a conviction, because I'm predicting there won't be any conviction of any sort.
Big question for me is, how do we get a jury to see what we all see? Which you said, like the digital evidence. I would even add to like the text. For instance, the one that I always harp on is the guy. Tell him the guy didn't come into the house.
Yep.
Matt McCabe sending to Brian Albert, and he says exactly, like, just messages like that, and like you
Right.
said, all the data. How do we get a jury as a defense to see how like what you said, scripted, how scripted it really is? Because when you look at it in the totality, that's what's so obvious to me is the script that they've been sticking with. But I think that the jury just kind of discounted it. The first jury, a lot of them, not everybody, but some of them. How do they pierce that?
Well, I think it's very critical on cases like this, especially when they're so politically charged, and you got what looks to be where the prosecution and law enforcement are stuck on a narrative, and they will not budge despite the overwhelming evidence that hits them in the face and says, no, your theory what happened is not correct. It's really important to do jury selection properly, and also lay out your theme to the jury on what really happened, and make sure the jurors understand and they're amenable to what you're saying can really happen. For example, police corruption and whatnot. Do you bring that out and on your jury selection and get them to admit that that can be a problem and is a problem? That it's not some far-fetched thing in the movies, right? It's something that really happens in true life. And so it's not even a matter of the defense has to say who actually did this. They just have to basically say that, look, there's all these holes in the government's case. Something obviously happened completely opposite of what they're saying happened. And Karen Reed makes an easy scapegoat.
Absolutely. Today we heard more about the jury tampering allegations, and it seems like the main allegation, it's not backed up completely, but it's kind of goes like this: that they're alleging that this Lieutenant Trooper Fanning for the Massachusetts State Police, who interviewed and investigated Karen Reed, interviewed a bunch of witnesses, was also involved in missing all the text in the Sandra Birchmore incident. Um, he was the one who contacted the court officer and said that this juror is doing something wrong and needs to be removed. Do you think that is something that the judge is going to listen to or flesh out, or is she just going to ignore this and we better not to ask any questions? That's what it seemed like to me. It seems like she doesn't want to know. How do you think this is going to be handled? And what have you ever seen anything like this where an investigator is tipping off allegedly? We don't, we'll see what if this gets backed up, but it seems like that's what the defense is saying, is that this guy Fanning, the lieutenant for the Massachusetts State Police, was the one that made the call or contacted directly, like a bailiff in the court, and said, "There's a problem with this juror, and I got a tip that they were doing this and doing that." And it was someone that seemed like they were pretty pro Karen Reed in terms of the reactions to Alan Jackson, for instance. Have you ever seen anything like that? And what do you think about it? And what do you think the judge will do or should do?
I just think it's so bizarre that you'd have somebody that was part of the investigation team on the case that has any contact at all with the jurors there. And I understand because of the crowd control and stuff like that, you have to have some security and stuff like that. But why would he be somebody that's involved with are they escorting the jurors out of the courthouse and stuff like that? And he can listen to what they're saying, and if that's the case, he can maybe he's suspecting that this is somebody that doesn't believe the government's theory that they're peddling. And so, yeah, he could easily say, hey, there's something that was said by this juror that I overheard them saying, and they're not supposed to be talking about the case. And something like that is very much very unusual, extremely rare. But I just don't think really this is so much about really getting the nitty gritty details of who's done what wrong in terms of due process for Karen Reed. I think it's more like they just want to get the show on the road. They just want to get this thing over with. They just want to get her convicted. And the kind of wrongdoings that other people have done to get this case to where it's at, I don't think the court really wants to have that much detail and light shed on it. And so I just think none of this is going to really amount to other than the most obvious thing that the judge has to do. I think she'll rule in that favor, like having certain experts for the defense. But then again, it's just so disturbing, Mike, to see prosecutors objecting to experts and you're denying the defendant due process. So they really, from my foxhole, I don't see any concern about due process for Karen Reed on the part of the prosecution. And so that's extremely troubling. And the duty of a prosecutor is to be fair and just and to pursue justice, not to get a conviction at all costs. So all these objections and whatnot are just so nauseating and disgusting to me. And keep in mind, I'm saying that as somebody that's been a prosecutor multiple times, a supervisory prosecutor, a defense counsel several times, a supervisory defense counsel. I've worked for the government. I've worked in private practice. And so I feel like I have experience that's very neutral based on what is fair and just. I'm not coming in here jaded as just a defense counsel or anything like that. So what I try to do is have absolute credibility and integrity in how I'm speaking about this. And no matter who's wrong, I can say things about the defense too that I observe as an attorney looking at this from the outside in. Like, for example, this whole thing about the inverted video is I'm just thinking, like, how could the defense miss this? Right? Defense completely botched it. They suddenly discovered it at trial. Well, look at that old police car sitting there. That's police written in reverse order, right? It's inverted. The number 4 on the door of the police Sally Port area is backwards as well. So they had multiple clues if they really studied that. And the other thing, what I find attorneys don't ever hardly do is they don't visit the scenes in question, the crime scene, or in this case, the crime scene, and also what was going on in the Sally Port there. You need to get a visual to really cross-examine people. I can just tell you, like, cases have been completely blown open for me, and I guarantee a win by actually going to places like that. So it just leads me to believe that they didn't really do their homework as much as they could have on that. So, but overall, like I say, the facts are lining up with what Karen's saying and not the prosecution.
My
And that's why I
understanding,
expect defense to
yeah,
win, So
yeah,
I
I
think
do.
also, what's that?
Yeah, I do see some comments in the chat, and I think it's my understanding too that this is what's weird about that Sally Port video is that the defense didn't get it until they didn't see it was introduced that day at the trial,
Okay.
and they never saw it before.
I thought it was a different version or something that
Yeah.
they had seen, but they're
Yeah, they
saying that
had seen a
whole.
different version, the darker one that you can't see anything.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
yeah, that's what's so crazy about it is that
Okay.
and
But
it's
what I'm
funny
saying
because
is,
we just played that video, right, too? When they played it in the court, you could see Karen Reed turn around because she figured it out right away. She knew exactly. That's why, like, they
okay.
objected
But
pretty quickly
what I'm
to it
saying
too.
is, even if it was dark and grainy, if you had actually
Yeah.
gone to this Sally Port as a lawyer, you would see that, wait a minute, if from the camera angle, the car's coming in from the left to right. And in reality, when you actually go there, it's like, wait a minute, it's going right to left. So I equate that to, something that the defense dropped the ball on. So they shouldn't have been surprised. Even if it was introduced at court for the first time, if there's another grainy video or whatever out there, then in any event,
What do you think about the motion to dismiss? Like, do you think it has merit from what you've read, or do you think not?
I, I do think it has merit. I mean, when you have the state botching it so many different ways and not producing this evidence, obviously and that's something that Jackson was mentioning, that they're making out this vehicle to be the instrumentality of death, the weapon that killed John O'Keefe, right? So, and of that, the tip of the weapon, the bullet, if you will, is the tail light. That's the thing that struck him the most. There's no other damage on the vehicle. It's just that plastic, which is very tough, by the way. The kind of toughness, so if it struck him at any kind of degree to leave significant near death or bodily injury to such a degree that he can't cry out for help and whatnot. That that is something that you got to preserve. And the way Brennan was just sort of making it sound like, oh well, he's equating that to like, well, we don't videotape and turn that over to defense, like the hallways of police departments and offices and all. Of course not. But here you're talking about it's like the gun at a crime scene, left at a crime scene, and you're bringing it back to the police station. You don't photograph it, how it was taken, where it was at the place and site. The way they collected the supposed tail light pieces, a couple days later, even as the snow is melting. I mean, there should be better forensic techniques to bring out how you collect that kind of evidence if they really believe that kind of thing. So it seems like it was something that was fabricated and manipulated to suit their theory. And so that's what it looks like to me. And because just from my visuals on the videotape differences, something did happen after it got loaded up and hauled away on that tow truck. And so one of the things, maybe the defense is considering is bringing in some kind of video expert that can make that enhancement from like the trooper's vehicle better, and also the Sallyport video. So I haven't seen that yet, but I think the thing is those kind of things are going to shed more light on the truth of the matter. And I think everything about that, the more you peel back the onion on the details like this and the digital evidence, the more it's going to help Karen, because the truth is on her side, not the prosecution's.
Funny, we talk about the tow of her vehicle from her parents' house in Dighton. Um, they didn't use their police vehicles that have video on them that would have recorded, because they claim that they followed the tow truck, but they were in their personal vehicles because they say they had four-wheel drive because of the
Oh
snow.
yeah, yeah.
Another convenient, just, we would have had video, but it just it's crazy, the stuff. And I had a retired highway patrolman come on from North Carolina,
I've seen
like
that.
recently. He's called in, yeah, and he said that he would have like he said basically he used to go to all kinds of car accidents, and they gave them camera, and he said he would have just kept recording pictures and pictures and pictures and pictures and pictures and pictures until they couldn't shoot anymore. If he had come across that car, like he just
Mhm,
couldn't believe that they didn't take pictures like that. Is
mhm.
that surprising to you? Like, do you see any situations where they don't take pictures like this in court cases?
No, I mean, this is such a botched case. There's no treatment of this as a true crime scene, and I think they thought Karen's an easy target. Let's pin it on her. And I mean, even if you look at the reconstruction expert, quote unquote, that you have with Joe Paul, the trooper, um, you can just tell by the way he talks, he doesn't even believe what he's saying. He doesn't understand physics. And to have him say that John got launched by hitting his arm and you go 30 feet, the other thing is like me looking at this from the physics standpoint, when the back end of that Lexus SUV, it's one of the, well, it is the biggest Lexus SUV, and those are very straight in the back, up and down. There's not a real curvature to them, right? Like some of the other SUVs that Lexus makes. And so with that, if you get struck by that, and the taillight is pretty high off the ground compared to other SUVs, right? So if you get hit by that, guess what? You're going down. You're not going up in the air, right? If
Right.
you got hit by the front end of a vehicle, and obviously the taller the vehicle is, the less likely you're going to be launched as high altitude wise. But if you get struck by that, you're going down pretty rapidly, and you're going to be run over by the vehicle. You're not going to be launched upward 30 feet in the air. And then also when you talk about the the physical evidence and the forensic review of it, you look at his injuries. they do not align at all with being struck. There's no way physics-wise he could be launched 30 feet in the air. And so Trooper Paul was just basically making up stuff out of the air. And I understand that accident reconstructionists, they have to look at it from the standpoint of what was told to them, right? To somewhat like from the different drivers, and they got to figure out, well, what do they believe really happened? But a lot of it's just belief on who's telling you the truth, right? So here, he didn't have any forensics to go on. He was just going by what people were telling him at the scene, specifically Trooper Tully, right? Or Lieutenant Tully. And so, if a lieutenant tells you what to do, this is what happened. He's only 8 years on the force. He's not going to deviate from that script. And so if he's not going to deviate from that script, he's just looking for, think about it, Mike, how much of that evidence was left behind that he actually saw for his own eyeballs? What was there? Nothing.
Nothing.
Right? Did he collect any evidence on the scene?
I don't
Did he
think
know
so.
exactly where
I don't
John
know.
laid before he was hauled off?
Nope.
No. It's all told to him and reported to him. So he's making a report based on everything that's hearsay. And yet that's supposed to be an expert testimony that we can rely upon, right? So he's never done any independent controlled studies on the polycarb tail light. What kind of damage does it take to do that? He's never done any studies on what kind of force is applied when a vehicle backing up 24 miles an hour, or let's say 15 miles an hour, does to the human body if you're standing there. So he doesn't know any of this kind of stuff. And the thing is, these kind of experts like him, so-called experts, which I would not even refer to him as an expert. I know Jackson referred to him as an expert during his cross. And I wouldn't even give this guy that credence that he's an expert, but he basically he cannot describe the physics of how John got launched, right? There's no way anybody could describe that. It's not humanly possible. And if you do get really hit by a vehicle, the crushing of your ribs, your arm, the crushing of your skull, I mean, there's massive damage that's going to happen to your body. And none of that lines up with what Trooper Paul was saying. So, I think that, I hope they bring out in this next trial the fact that he says, "Just kill me," under his breath, you know?
It was wild.
And, so I think he knows. And the other thing I would bring up is that, he's under tremendous pressure to follow the narrative, right?
Yes.
So I would bring up the fact that his career is really on the line if he doesn't stick to the script. He'd be considered a traitor to the Canton Police Department and the state police if he doesn't stick to the script, right? So,
I think it was actually Guarino. It was the cell phone guy who also missed all the texts of Sandra Birchmore. He's the one who said, "Kill me." Yeah,
was that the guy? It wasn't Paul?
trooper. Yeah, no,
Okay.
they're both
All right.
state troopers, but yeah,
Okay.
that was
Sorry, I mixed that
Guarino.
up.
Yeah,
But you know what? I guess I'm crossing my hairs on that because that's the kind of, I believe, mental standpoint that Trooper Paul was. He did not really want to be there. He was very nervous.
he was not confident.
No,
Well,
no.
I mean, like me being up there and trying to explain physics is like, I would just laugh and be like, "I don't know. I'm sorry, bro. I don't know. I didn't do well in that class."
Yeah, and he has no experience on bodily injury and stuff like that. And here's the other thing. I guarantee you he's never been a part of a case where there's a second-degree murder charge where he's trying to reconstruct an accident, right? How many times is a vehicle used to try to kill somebody in Massachusetts that you know of, Mike? He said he showed up to 200 or 300 accidents. Well, how many of those were, second-degree murder charges resulting from? So I think he's never been on TV before testifying and whatnot. So, I mean, he's got tremendous pressure on him. And his career's on the line. If he doesn't stick to the script, his career's on the line. And so, anyway, I think it's another black eye for justice there in Massachusetts to have this kind of expert giving all this hearsay information and then saying this is what happened as if it's the truth. It's really disturbing on so many levels, right?
Sure is. What about Hank Brennan, this special prosecutor? What's your thoughts on the way he's
Yeah,
been
I
acting
think
in court here?
I think it's I think there's something very odd that he would give up his practice, as I said before, to go become a special prosecutor for this kind of case. For him to still stick with second-degree murder case, it's just there's some other agenda going on, and maybe he wants to take over Morrissey. Maybe there's some kind of aspirations he has there, and so there's something else going on because um, he's not. He's not coming across as somebody that I feel is an honest broker. And the other thing I think that's good for Karen's side is that the the likability of attorneys is paramount in the trial practice for juries. And I think that Karen definitely has the upper hand on likability of attorneys. So I think he comes across as non-likable to the jury. He may be a nice guy, a great guy, a personal guy, but he's not the way he comes across, the way he talks. He's just I can just see him really getting under the skin of the jury. And so that's going to help Karen's side because the jury is always trying to determine both these attorneys know what really happened that are arguing, or in this case, we got multiple attorneys, and all of them know the truth. And I want to see which one is really being honest, most honest with me, because that's probably the side I need to vote with, right? So, um, and Jackson has made some missteps. He's said some things publicly that sort of I'm scratching my head going, why would you say that? Because that's not, like when he said, we unpaid the experts. Like, well, you did. Why would you say that to the public? So that's the kind of thing I don't understand why they would say something like that. So it doesn't help. It just potentially hurts your client. But overall, like I say, I think the truth is on their side, and in the end, the truth is gonna win out. And here's the thing, Mike. The experts now the state is trying to bring in. They're trying to bring in their own dog expert kind of thing. And the thing is, I I would say that when you got the truth on your side, no matter who they bring on as an expert, you can poke holes in them and actually flip them and have them support your theories. So I'm not really afraid as a trial attorney of who the government's going to bring on if I'm a defense attorney for experts or if I'm on the other side. I don't care about these experts because ultimately, when I have the truth on my side, I can easily expose the fallacies and faults and weaknesses of the other side's experts, right? And it
Yeah.
comes down to common sense. And that's one thing I think, Mike, is really disturbing, though, is that these jurors that wanted to go for the manslaughter conviction on Karen, they basically were trying to say that, well, she's the last one that we know saw him alive, so we got to pin it on somebody, kind of thinking. That's really bizarre, considering all the hubbub activity that's going on in that house after Karen left. Because think about it, Karen left shortly after midnight, right? So it's one of those deals where they got to make sure they get their jury selection nailed down properly, and make sure the jurors understand reasonable doubt during jury selection, and then hammer that home in their closing.
Boy, that's one of my next questions for you. How do they do that right? But before I get there, just want to mention I think some of the chat is loving what you said, and I think they agree with you. I agree with you too that Hank Brennan, I think he's going to run for DA. I think that
Mm,
Morrissey's going to name him heir apparent
yeah.
if he gets a guilty plea. You know what I mean? So that's that's what they want. I totally see that happening. But let's talk about the jury. How do they get how does the defense make sure they get the right jury? What kind of questions should they be asking these jurors?
Well, what I do is take for any kind of jury selection for me, I basically take the general premise of what is the theme about, what is the theory of the case, which in my case, I take it as if my case is has the truth on its side. And even if I have a case where if I think back and look at it, it's like, yeah, I think there could be some indications of guilt from my client. But there's so many things that when the government does so many things wrong and they botch it so bad, that can equate to reasonable doubt right there. And when the government does things that offends the notions of fairness and justice to the jury, you got to hammer that home and drive it home and make a huge deal about it, because it is a big deal. And so, this whole thing about the inversion of video and stuff like that, I think the all the missteps of the prosecution, the evidence collection, and the way they just didn't even treat this case as a true crime scene. Um, that those kind of things should be fleshed out in jury selection. Failure of cops to follow police standards, the uh, the the likelihood that there could be situations that police do lie to get a conviction, things of that nature. You want to screen out as many pro police folks as possible, and because people generally want to believe the police, right? And generally, we talk about this, you're presumed innocent and whatnot, but there is an allegation against Karen, and that's why she's there in the defendant's seat, right? But you got to bring out the fact that, and get the jury to really to think that it's not just presumed innocent. It's like you have to presume that she's been falsely accused and make the government hold their feet to the fire. And then I talk about also in my closing, and also in my voir dire jury selection, I talk about how, what's presumed innocent mean, and how far does the government have to prove their case, and what does it mean to be convinced beyond a reasonable doubt, and you really get the jury to talk about that and get them to take it very serious, where you want them to go home. I think we talked about that before, where they can go home and sleep at night, right? So you just reinforce all these themes of how critical and important their job is, and how the job of law enforcement is required to help upheld different standards. And so you drive home all these, and also you could talk about physical evidence not aligning up with the testimony of government witnesses and whatnot. Could that be a sign that could not believe a witness? So you just put all these suggestive narratives out there to the jury pool as you're going through jury selection. And the ones that don't answer the right way, or you think they're too pro-government, I can tell you also, like, there's certain professions or certain backgrounds of people I look to screen, and automatically I would not want them on a case.
Those
So,
be.
pardon me?
What do you think on this case? Like, what kind of professions would you probably exclude automatically?
Well, I think I can tell you, like, probably the number one the number one person I would look to not have on a jury is somebody that's a recovering alcoholic. And
Makes
because
sense.
from
That
my
makes sense.
experience,
Yep.
both with um, someone that was a family member, as well as what I've seen actually on other people's jurors from their jury trials, and hearing what happened, and some of the fallout, stuff like that, you can really have things go sideways, because those people, not everyone, obviously, you can't generalize, but just from what I've seen, there's enough of those that if somebody is a recovered alcoholic, and here you got drinking involved as well, right? They're trying to say Karen was
Uh,
driving drunk. So you got to screen out folks that are, maybe been a victim of drunk driving, or have a zero tolerance view of drinking and driving. So because the drinking and driving wasn't really, she's not charged with manslaughter via intoxication, right? They actually can't prove what her blood alcohol level was, or breathalyzer results were, right? So they're trying to make it look like she got crazy drunk and was, that reckless, and that's why she was ranting at John and all that kind of stuff. So they're trying to make her out to sort of be like in a crazy state of mind. And so I would say those kind of people are who you want to have, screened out, and make sure they're not on the jury, because they can otherwise come up with some really bizarre results.
Good point about the reformed alcoholics. I can totally see that. We've got a number of, in my family, and I just think of a couple like that they would not be the right jurors for this. That makes so much sense, actually.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, not everybody. Everybody's different, but when you're doing the jury thing, you're playing a numbers game, and that's what you're
Yep.
looking at is the percentages. And such a good point. So many things tonight. Yeah. Have you heard about the Michael Morrissey, the district attorney? A while back, he put out this video, which a lot of us call the hostage video, where he says that, these witnesses didn't know Michael Proctor, which was all lies. And he basically, put out a video, like recorded it, put it out. Have you seen the video? Do you know about
You,
the video?
I need to. Somebody sent it to me, and I've not looked at it yet. I actually was thinking about that today, and I have not looked at it yet. I think it's about an 18-minute clip, right?
Yes, exactly.
And so I will look at that today because I've been derelict in doing that. But yeah, it is very odd for a district attorney to go out there and vouch for credibility of the prosecution witnesses and whatnot. So it's you know it's just everything about this case is so strange and bizarre, and how the government's handling the case and the evidence, and the way they charge and what they're telling the court. So I think I'm just a firm believer, if you have the right tenacious defense lawyers when the prosecution is acting this way, in the end, justice will happen. So I'm not concerned about it. And I think in the end, it's just very, very much like I mean, you can't see a movie this riveting and really attention grabbing, because this is so, I mean, you can't make this stuff up, right? So it's and like I say, truth is stranger than fiction, and here we got some really strange truths coming out. And the government has this single track vision, and they're going to get derailed here in the end. So I'm
Now
confident.
the yes, definitely incompetent. A lot of problems there. There's an affidavit that came out that we were looking at about the video data, and
Yep.
they're still trying to get this. And we've done a lot of shows with a video expert recently talking about this data and the video, and all the issues with the Sally Port video. She's even pointed out when we're playing old testimony that it looks like that there's a lot of indication that the video was edited. Um, what do you think about the fact that they're still asking for video data and the judge doesn't seem to care? Like, that just to me seems wild that the judge hasn't asked the prosecution to turn over the data and not just the video itself.
Yeah, I mean, a normal judge in America would just be blasting away at the prosecution if there's any kind of evidence that was not turned over. I mean, that's massive, massive, calls for the prosecution to be in really hot water with the judge. And it just seems like, hey, no big deal. Just keep trying to find, what they're owed, and if it comes up after the first trial, even, it's not a big deal. So yeah, it's the prosecution doesn't have any fear of having to do the right thing with the judge come coming at them and crushing them. So, and I think they realize that they got this in the bag. This motion is to dismiss. They're not worried about it. They got it in the bag.
Definitely. You know what I want to do right now? One second, actually. You get a super chat. I want to read from Mr. Monk's understudy. He says, "Carl, can you make some version of a list for this case like you did why Wendy is guilty?" Question mark.
Um, yeah, I guess I don't know if I'll I guess I could make a list on all the avenues of reasonable doubt, right? As opposed to saying who's the person or persons responsible for John O'Keefe's murder. So I would say that it'd be more along the lines of a list of what are the indicators that she's not guilty and not involved in this. And so I basically have already covered a lot of those tonight. And
That we have.
any one of those could be enough for reasonable doubt. So when you have multiple upon multiple upon multiple questions, you have multiple indicators of deception by witnesses for the government. And the government's just going to sit there and tell you, and this is what happens over and over again, Mike. The government will sit there, no matter how many lies or deceptions that their own witnesses will be exposed on in court, the prosecution will continue to prop them up as truthful witnesses. So the forensic evidence doesn't align with their theory of the case. The testimony's all over the place. There's motive galore. I would say from the defense standpoint, the number one thing that I have to drive home an acquittal is motive of witnesses, and biases can be closely aligned with that as well. But motive is sort of like where the heart and soul of winning criminal cases is. I mean, you know how to press witnesses' buttons and expose their motives to tell lies and what their agenda is real about. That's what really can, from my experience, makes a difference between winning and losing cases. So here you have, so many things that are done suspiciously that the folks that are in that house, and so that right there is enough for reasonable doubt. What's searched, when it's searched, what's phone's being tracked, digital evidence showing that John went up 3 flights of stairs. I mean, how does that happen? And yet Karen's guilty. You can't have it both ways, right? So there's nothing physically or digitally, forensically that aligns up with the government's theory about how Karen is responsible for this.
Absolutely. We just put in the chat, if anyone wants to call in today, we're not going to do the phone number. We're just going to throw in the StreamYard link. If you want to call in, you don't have to turn on your video. You can just do the voice. But if you have a question or comment tonight, definitely check out that StreamYard link. We just posted it in the chat. If you have a question, you can definitely doesn't cost you anything. I know a lot of people get mad about the super chat sometimes. They say their questions don't go through unless they're super chat. This is a free way you can jump right on and ask a question if you want tonight. Yeah, I mean the whole thing about, like you said, the data and the butt dials, that's a big one for me. The butt dials, it just their excuses. They just don't. That's like you said earlier, sticking to the script. That's they just excuse everything away.
Yeah, I mean but it's very common, Mike. It's very common that they don't want to see it for what it is, and you can't get a more politically charged case than a police officer that's supposedly was murdered, right? So,
And
and
when
it
you
is
say, yeah,
what?
oh, go ahead. I was going to say, when you say politically, I imagine you've seen. Can you give other people some examples of like political cases that you've seen or represented in the past and how those worked?
Well, I would say probably right up there, if not more political, is, for example, all the stuff you've been hearing over the years about how the military is not handling sexual assault cases properly and how the command covers it up. If you got a soldier that's favored by the command, they got a lot of years of experience, how they can, the command will cover things up and basically just make sure that this person's career is unblemished. And just to some extent, that is true. But I would say that what's evolved over my almost 30 years in the military, I retired in 2020, and what I saw was it became more and more political as time went on. Congress is more and more involved in stuff. The normal chain of command that's involved in the prosecution of soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marines is taken away for certain types of cases, to include those kind of sexual assault cases. So now you have folks that are in Washington D.C. deciding who's going to be charged and whatnot, and so it's a much more elevated type review of who's going to be charged and what are they going to be charged with, and as a result, things are way overcharged, and because they don't want to have Congress calling them out and say they're not, they're not being tough on crime, and so you have a lot of false accusations that are never disclosed to the media. I can tell you, like, as a defense attorney, for sexual assault type cases, I've had not a single client ever get convicted that went not guilty. Okay, and a lot of them got crushed through dismissals. I've had alleged victims invoke their rights during well, in the military we sort of have like a grand jury proceeding where you can question the witnesses, any of the relevant witnesses you can question, including the alleged victim. And through that, I mean, I've had them invoke their rights to counsel because they get caught in lies and realize they're busted. So, um, So it's very much, you know, if there's an accusation against you of that in the military, your career's over with. Even if you're exonerated at court martial, your career's going to be over because nobody's going to want to come to your aid and defense. You're still going to be given a reprimand. This is a career killer. So, you know, and they've made it favorable for if somebody alleges that they were assaulted. Guess what? You can ask for your choice assignment. You can be asked anywhere in the world that the service has location, whether you want to be stationed in Italy or Germany or Hawaii. You get a rapid transfer approved. So you don't like it where you're stationed, you can falsely accuse somebody and immediately transfer to your dream station. So, yeah, so there's a lot of incentives like that to have people fabricate stuff. And so, and I would say probably like 95% of them are false accusations. I mean, that's something that people don't hear about in the general media, right? Congress doesn't know about it. But if you look at the actual stats, it's mind-boggling how many false accusations there are out there.
Easy. Wild. The justice system isn't that just. Glamis says, "Thank you for your service, Carl. My friend, retired Lieutenant Colonel Erdman, worked with sexual assault victims and helped change the old boy system."
Yeah, and I've also prosecuted sexual assault too. So I'm just saying you got to, as a prosecutor, you have to, and I've gotten convictions as a prosecutor. You know, you need to do the right thing, not to be afraid to take a case, and say, look, you just don't. We find the testimony not credible, and be able to tell the alleged victim that, you know, there's not proof here that you were assaulted. Okay, we're not taking this to trial. But what happens is nobody wants to, you know, be the person to say, you know, I'm the one that squashed this allegation. I'm the one that prevented it from going to trial. So everything gets, you know, propped up for trial and prosecuted. And no matter how bad of a case it is, you're going to have a jury sit there and listen to all this, spend all the money, and all for nothing, because it's going to be a not guilty vote. Although I have seen that also where it can be politicized and they actually do vote guilty, even though the case was completely meritless. And but that's not been one of my cases. That's just been other folks' cases.
Just reading the chat right now. You know, we got someone calling in.
All right.
Mark. Let's see what Mark's got. If he's got a comment, a question, Mark, I'm going to bring you up right now, Mark. Hope you're ready. Mark, are you ready? Give me a thumbs up in the green room. He's giving me the thumbs up. All right, Mark. What's up? How you doing tonight?
I'm fine, not too bad. I'm from England. I'm from England, and I'm watching the Karen Reid thing and everything. I was just wondering, is the Commonwealth trying to get rid of the defence lawyers? And if that's the case, in what probably a mistrial? I mean, a dismissal or something, or do you know what I mean? The Commonwealth trying to get rid of the defence. What would happen?
What do you think, attorney? I mean, they definitely are. The prosecution is trying to, you know, they went after Jackson and the judge did that thing. So what do you think, attorney Steinbach? What would happen, Steinbach? What would happen if she sanction him, or do you think she will? What do you think about all that with Alan Jackson?
Yeah, my prediction is the judge is going to defer a ruling on whether Jackson, any part of the defense team, is committing any misconduct, because if she made the effort of finding him to have been in contempt, and he's therefore going to have his guest pass, so to speak, to be admitted to practice there in Massachusetts. Because keep in mind, Mark, the way it works in America is that you have to be licensed in each particular state. And if you're not licensed in that state, you don't have a right to practice law in another state in their jurisdiction, unless you have local counsel, unless you've been vetted, unless you have some affidavits saying that you're an honest, ethical attorney. You will not be admitted in a foreign state's court. And so he's got a lot on the line here, because if she finds that he's not been credible and trustworthy and honest to the court and intentionally misled her, you know, that could be grounds to have him booted off the case before this second trial takes off. But then you got the appellate issue of right to counsel attaching. This is a murder case. So I don't think she wants to open up the can of worms. I think she'd probably, you know, be the type to hit him as the case is over, and decide also then it's like, all right, I'm going to sort of get the totality of what I think about him, and then sort of like either be lighter on punishment or tougher on punishment if she really is turned off by him. But it does appear to me that she does not like him, and she's very much deferential to the prosecution to the extent it looks like to the jury. And that's what's really my concern, is that when you have a judge that's telegraphing to the jury that the defense attorney is not a trustworthy, credible representative for the defendant, that hurts the defendant. And her as a career public defender it's just really a head scratcher to me. It's like, why is she not understanding that you're telegraphing a lot of bad vibes to the jury about Alan Jackson in particular? So, and the way she tries to interject herself as a questioner of witnesses and cutting off Jackson from asking follow-up questions. Because keep in mind, cross-examination is where many times and most times you win and lose cases, okay? If you can't get in there and just beat up a witness with calling them out on their lies and their motives, like I said, motive is such a huge thing. If you can't do that as an attorney, you got the judge cutting you off and you got all these absolutely ridiculous objections by the prosecution. To me, the prosecution is not about giving Karen a fair trial. It's about how do we get a conviction and keep all the helpful questions about that defense is trying to elicit. How do we get those helpful questions to the defense theory? How do we squash those from getting out in front of the jury? So it is very, very upsetting to see this kind of it's more like a railroad job than a quest for justice, as I look at it from as a neutral stand position here. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, Mark. I couldn't really hear your question that good.
Yeah. And another thing for me is I think the judge is really biased. I think he's really biased.
Yeah, she's really biased. Yeah, judge is definitely really biased. Thank you for calling tonight, Mark.
No
That was a
problem.
great question. I agree with you. Do you think Attorney Steinbeck that she is biased, Carl?
I don't think the judge is trying to be biased, but I think that and maybe she's acting differently in this case than other cases. Like I said, I've never seen her before. I don't know what she's like in normal practice to practice in front of her. I'm just saying it as someone that is taking this as from a neutral position, and now I'm seeing that justice is not being meted out fairly for Karen Reed. Then I am taking Karen Reed's side and her counsel side, because things are significantly wrong. Due process is being violated. And when you have the judge acting like she's totally always deferential to the prosecution, never gets upset at the prosecution can do no wrong, the defense is always in the hot seat, and you got major blunders by the prosecution and evidence not being turned over when it should be. I mean, this should be like just something where she's ready to throw the book at the prosecution, but it's just sort of like not a big deal to her. So I would say that maybe all this public scrutiny will maybe change her tune a little bit here in round 2, because it's got to be getting back to her that a lot of folks on social media and legal channels do not hold her in high regard for the way she's handling this case from the bench.
Definitely. I wonder about that. I wonder how the fellow judges think about it all. We've had a number of people checking in with StreamYard. We lost a couple. I would like them to try to call back in, especially my friend from North Carolina. Carolina was waiting in the green room. I was trying to get him up, but he jumped off. Hopefully he calls back. I got Mexico City here. He's our friend from Mexico City via Westwood, Mass. He's actually from, grew up at Westwood, Mass. Let's bring up our friend from Mexico City. What do you have for us tonight, sir?
Hey, how you guys doing?
Good.
I got 2 quick things. First, for Carl, in a normal case, the defense hires, the experts, they pay them, they're clearly biased. In this case, they were paid for it, the results were finalized. So this idea that the defense ever lied to the court about who was responsible for the results should have been like rejected on its face. It doesn't make any sense. It was a weird case. Like, even you still considering maybe they should sanction Jackson? The only time that matters is when you're the guy who hired them, when the results have been set in stone and finalized by the feds. It's just the most ridiculous talking point, because we have the juror testimony who said they discounted it because they thought she was hired by the insurance company. And then my other thing was, I have more hope Aunt Bev will dismiss after what I saw today, but I'm calling it now. If it goes to trial, Proctor's taking the fifth and it dies right there.
Wow. Why do you think she might dismiss?
I think they might have the hearing. It was overwhelming today. Holding back 3 years, he copied 6-hour segments that were never turned over. Like, the malfeasance that came to light today was magnitudes more than anything. I'm not saying she's going to do it. I'm saying I got more hope than I ever had after what happened today. But I wanted to call it on the record. If it doesn't, Proctor has to take the fifth, and maybe Carl can explain why a trial wouldn't end. But I'm assuming if the lead investigator has to take the fifth, it dies that day.
What do you think, Carl?
Yeah, I mean, the going back to your first question though, regarding the ARCA witnesses and whether they're paid or not. I think that whole thing, that's why I don't understand why Jackson just didn't come clean with that, because they paid him after the fact. And if it was never discussed ahead of time, I totally agree with you that they made their conclusions independent. They did it for the FBI. The FBI is law enforcement, right? The highest level we get in America. And so they were doing a job looking at it, I believe, from a total scientific standpoint, right? So the fact that defense counsel paid him something, I don't know why Jackson was so worried about that. It just readily admitted, yeah, we paid him after the fact, and we were inconvenienced. And now the fact there's a mistrial, we do want to make sure they come back, right? Because you're not going to find more credible witnesses for that. So I think that's why they probably paid it. And I
but
think
did he really try to hide it? When Alessi gave that timeline, it didn't look to me like he tried to hide anything.
Well, I think the sidebar is the thing I'm reflecting on, is when he said something like, we've not, had any contact with him. There's not been any payment, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, but stop. Hank Brennan left out the part that came right after that, where they said, yes, we have talked to them. He left it out of the quote in his filing. So they did say, yes, we have talked.
Yeah. And
they didn't turn over the outline. They didn't turn over the outline. That's the only thing.
And the defense is the one that told them that they paid them, right? They told the prosecution that they paid them. So it's sort of like, it's just sort of like a minor, very minor thing that I don't think is something that should be sanctionable.
Do they usually get sanctions for that?
It's just the prosecution is being so petty and so much just trying to really wear down the defense with all these accusations of improper, unethical type behavior and whatnot. I mean, they're out for scorched earth. Bring them down any way you can. And so I think, and the judge is willing to have a hearing on this and whatnot. I mean, all that time it took to have this litigated, I've never seen anything like it. It's just really bizarre. This whole court case is really out of control. And I don't think the judge really has good firm grip on it. And she doesn't have a commanding presence in the courtroom. She's not decisive. Have you seen anything from this judge that's decisive?
No, in favor of the defense. No, if she can favor the prosecution, she's quite decisive.
Like a school teacher,
like scolding the defense or something like that. Saying things like, better than that. In other words, you're sleazy and unethical lawyer. The jury shouldn't believe it. I'm highly offended by that. And here's the thing: if I was with all these objections from the prosecution, here's one thing I would do that the defense team's not doing. If I was Jackson and the prosecution's constantly trying to interrupt the flow of my cross-examination, and the real good questions I'm asking, they're totally legitimate, and I'm asking them and framing them the right way. All these objections that he's facing, I would have a sidebar every single time and let them know I'll just drag this case out 5 months if I have to. I will get my questions asked, and you will not be trying to steamroll my momentum on zinging these questions out for your flimsy witnesses. And then you're going to tell the judge is also going to be realizing that too. It's like, if every time there's an objection, if I don't listen to the defense, what they're saying, and how they really think about how this is a fair question or not, if I'm going to have a sidebar and this is going to eat up time and whatever, you let them know you're not going to be pushed around like that. So I really look at it sort of like the defense has allowed themselves to be pushed around a lot. And so they have.
Would it help them
What's that?
would it help them to file a motion at this point over judicial bias, or can they just do that at the
No.
end and there's no benefit to?
No, I
No.
think what I sort of like my methodology when I'm facing obstructionist prosecution, and then and whoever's on the bench is not being fair to me, I make sure I develop a record, and I basically just don't give up. You cannot give up. You got to keep fighting. You got to call the court out on their unfair rulings, and you got to be heard, because you know what? If they did do that, she would have to reverse a lot of her rulings, and she would know that she's being called out on it. Right now, she's not really being called out on it much, right? They just move on to the next question, or she'll say sustained without explaining why it's sustained. I'm like, why is that sustained? That makes no sense. That's totally legitimate. He should be doing that as a defense counsel, right? And then she says, rephrase, or objection is sustained as to form, or whatever these common answers she has for her rulings. It's like, I don't get that. How could you frame it any better? And so I think that if I was a part of the defense team, I'd be having all these sidebars, and I'd be letting the prosecution know you're not going to be. And I would call them out in court saying, this is like an agenda of the prosecution. Yeah, ask it differently. That's another good one.
Get
Ask the
differently, Mr. Jackson. Yeah, she says that all the time.
Yeah. So why does it need to be asked differently?
Yeah.
It's like I say, this is a good lessons learned kind of thing for the folks following this, that this is the kind of thing prosecutors do to try to disrupt the momentum that the defense has. Seriously, that isn't actually a conscious technique.
Game plan.
It's just object. Just try to set off, knock them off their toes,
Slow them down.
knock them off their thought train.
It's like with the NFL, when you have a kicker and they call timeout to ice the kicker. Or like even ice free throws or whatever. They do that too in sports.
Yeah.
We have more callers here. That's why I want to thank Mexico City for calling in, but I need to get some of these other folks in. We also got some super chats we're behind on. My friend, the retired North Carolina State Highway Patrolman, is on the line. What do you have for us tonight, sir?
Hey, Mike. Hey, Carl. I got a question for Carl. In all of your years prosecuting and defending clients when somebody is killed as a result of a motor vehicle crash, have you ever seen an agency not do a crash report? I haven't. I charged misdemeanor of death by motor vehicle several times, and I couldn't imagine sitting on the stand and not having a crash report to look at and talk about. And, I don't understand, if they thought this was a crash, why a crash report wasn't completed.
Right. I've not handled a motor vehicle type of homicide case before, officer, but I can tell you, I totally agree with you that nothing was done according to normal police standards, investigation standards on this case. It was all treated like something's very much wrong when you have this elevated to a secondary murder case, and yet they did about the investigation level like this was like a $500 fender bender type case, right? And then they just prop this up in front of a jury, and they think that Karen and her team are just going to roll over. And so anyway, it's very much something that like yourself, officers, they call somebody like you as a witness, an expert witness, to talk about how botched this is. I mean, I think a normal jury gets it, how botched this is, but based on those jurors that thought that just mere presence at the scene where John was found dead, that can be a finding of manslaughter. So you need to bring in these experts, and I think the ARCA ones were enough to like nail it for Karen's case, that there's no way they can pin this on her. But I would say bring in another expert on the aspects of the digital forensics, the aspects of police investigation, how botched this was. I mean, you cannot find a more botched murder case than this, I would say.
Well,
From
one
start
of
to
the
finish is botched.
one of the first things I would have done before it was towed, like Mike said a while ago, I would have taken 75 or 100 pictures of that vehicle before it got put on the rollback, and we wouldn't be sitting here talking about it today.
Right.
And why they didn't do it, I don't understand. I mean, there's so many things in this case that I have never seen in my 30 years, and I investigated thousands of motor vehicle crashes, and I mean, it's really unbelievable.
Right. Well, and I think anybody like yourself or me that's done, law enforcement, and I've done criminal defense. Anybody that has any understanding of criminal law and how justice happens in America, it's just like mind-boggling how botched this case is from the prosecution standpoint, and they're just hell-bent on staying stuck on stupid no matter what happens. But in the end, officer, do you believe, like I do, that no jury is going to find her liable and
Yes,
guilty, beyond reasonable
yes,
doubt?
I believe that because, like you said earlier, I have ran it through my mind thousands of times, and I've tried to figure out how the crash could happen. And, he had those injuries on his arm. And like you said, if he was backed into, he would have went straight down. He's not going to go 30 feet in the air and spin around and all that stuff. I mean, that's pretty much common sense. And,
Right.
and the scratches, on his right arm, what I would have done was I would have measured from the ground to the top of the tail light, then to the top of the vehicle. This guy is 6'2", so I would assume he would have to been slumped over somehow to get his arm, crossed over to even hit the tail light. So there's just more questions than there are answers. I mean, I would not have done a crash report in this case. I'll be honest with you. And if my supervisors made me, I obviously would do it. But I would sit on the stand and say, I don't think this was a crash. So I would have not done a crash report in this case of especially with the injuries I saw on Mr. O'Keefe. I do not believe it was a motor vehicle crash.
Officer, you've seen so many vehicle accidents, and you have a much better experience in sizing up how vehicles respond to striking, whether it's pedestrians or deer or other vehicles and whatnot. Is there anything that you've seen of the autopsy photos of Officer O'Keefe that aligns with a motor vehicle strike? No.
I mean, where I live, we have deer, people hitting deer all the time. There's always a lot of hair left on the front or the side or whatever. But if you look at his arm, the marks are going up and down. So his arm would have to be straight up. And I don't know how those scratch marks would be from a tail light. I mean, when I saw the picture, I knew immediately it was not as a result of a crash. I came to that conclusion without hearing anything. So
to me, it's common sense. I mean, I don't need to listen to any medical expert. I don't need to listen to ARCA experts. It's like you just look at it and it's like, there's no way this guy got killed by a vehicle strike.
Well, one more thing, Carl, I brought up with Mike last time I was on the air. What they've done here is they would have got to the scene and they would have put up tents and they would have melted all that snow in the front yard. They would have been there probably a week. The SBI here has their own evidence van. All that snow would have been melted. So and a lot of pictures have been taken. If somebody would have come and, plant 45 pieces of a tail light, hey, we got pictures at the scene where we melted the snow. Something's not right. And, that chief went out there and, You know, I would have said, look, man, you were told to stay out of this investigation. Stay away from this house. We're the one investigating it. I'll look at what you got, and I'll call the district attorney. I'll let him or her decide, you know, how we go. But, you know, all of a sudden he drives by there and he sees these pieces. What, 2, 3, 4 weeks later? I mean, come on. I mean, that's hard
Yeah.
for me to believe.
Yeah, well, that's why somebody like you would be a great witness to testify for the defense on all these detailed procedures that they botched, and they thought it had in a bag. They thought they could easily pin it on Karen. So why go by normal police procedure? And the thing is, this is a killed officer of all things, right? This is
Well,
not some bum off the street of Boston or something like that, where maybe they don't value their life as much. This is an actual police officer, one of their own, and they give him zero regard. So
Well, we would have had probably, I don't know, 50 troopers, and the SBI would have been there, and the district attorney would have came out. And I can tell you now, within 5 minutes, we would have knocked on that door. We would have separated everybody. We would have seized all cell phones, and we would have had a search warrant, and we would have went in that house 1,000%. I can promise you we would have searched that house.
right, and you also would have done a subpoena of all their phone records, right? Their
Yes.
cell phone messages and all that. So what do you
Yes.
also think about the fact that you have a retired police officer whose yard this death happened in, and he doesn't even come out of the house? What do you think of that, officer?
Once again, unbelievable. I hope it don't happen to me, but if there's a body in my yard and, you know, I see blue lights or whatever, I'm going out there. I'm going to invite the police to come in. You can search anything. I have nothing to hide. And see, the reason you want to go in that house is you got a body in the front yard. There may be somebody inside that's injured.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't know what you got, but you have to separate people and you have to talk to them and, you know, get all the search warrants. And one other thing, and I'll get off of here. They still have a vehicle. I don't understand that. We would have took it to our garage and stored it, and we would probably had it maybe 2 weeks at the most. And once we were done with it completely, she would have gotten it back. There's no reason to keep the vehicle. I mean, I investigated many fatalities where, you know, we stored it. The reconstruction unit came out. I called the owner, you know, within 10 days or whenever. I said, you can come pick up your vehicle. I don't see any legal reason to keep storing that vehicle.
No.
What do you think?
Great point.
So
Thank you for calling. Thank you for calling again tonight.
thank you, Mike. Have a good night.
Thanks,
You
officer.
do. He's great. That's a good point. Like, why are they still keeping her car?
Yeah, that's well, it's part of the part and parcel that, you know, nothing
Punishment.
about this case is done to standard. Yeah,
We
like
should
some
know.
standards.
We've seen him several times tonight. That's Leo the cat tonight. He's wicked cute. I love him. He likes you. You can tell. I got a comment here. Rosemary says, "Hi, gents. Seen chatter about Bev's judicial immunity being possibly affected by some administrative role in the court. Is there any truth to that? I don't know. I have no idea on that.
I mean, judges have judicial immunity, so anything they do is pretty much immune from lawsuits. So there's nothing that Karen's going to ever be able to come back on with the judge unless she's found to you know, have committed some kind of crime. But that's not something that you commonly see, obviously.
Comment from Glamis Seuss says it would have been all hands on when a law enforcement officer is found dead. The house would have been searched for your information. The taillight pieces, excuse me, would have been plowed far away. Yeah, especially in Massachusetts. I think in most places, you know, law enforcement goes down, it's a priority. I think they would go
Yeah.
into any house, and especially here, especially in Canton.
I like that point about the taillight pieces would have been plowed far away. They've not been collectively, you know, assembled there. And so obviously the snowplow, depends on where the snowplow was and where the body was found. But yeah, that could have been a likely indicator as well. Is like how would you find these pieces all collected together right there?
Question. Yeah. I don't know how you would. We got one more caller. We have it pinned in the street in the top of the chat, the YouTube on the Young Jerks right now. If you want to call in tonight, you don't have to call in on the phone number. I know a lot of our overseas people told me they didn't want to pay the extra fees to call America, and I don't blame you. So we have StreamYard. You can call in with your StreamYard. You don't have to turn on the video. The link is pinned at the top of the chat if you want to make a quick comment or question tonight. Let's bring up, this is a first time caller, I believe. I've never seen this one before. So who knows? It could be good or bad. Let's find out. Chief, what's up? Are you there? Can you hear us, Chief? You might be on mute. Are you on mute? No, you're not. We can't hear you. You have a comment or question?
Hey, how you doing? Yeah, I can hear you. No, I have a good friend of mine that's a lawyer, and she started watching this. And I mean, we had the DOJ investigate Phoenix PD, all kinds of corruption. But she says she has never seen a judge be so pro prosecution than Bev, you know. And I mean, I've worked with ARCA. I worked for a company here in Phoenix that we did the armor kits for the Humvees. You had to pass a background check to be able to touch that product. And I have never seen anything in my life, former law enforcement in my family. And I've never seen something like this where tail lights appear. I mean, that video Jesus stated that there in the video on the bottom headliner, there was the Photoshop and Premiere. That
Right.
tells you the video's been tampered with. It's 42 minutes of video missing.
Yeah, that was
People
amazing.
teleporting in and out of that Sally port. And the prosecution still turning over evidence. You know, I was in the military and we took an oath, and you're held to the highest standard. You know, I'm 100% service connected. You know, I almost gave my life for this country, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat. You know, and it's just so mind-boggling with all the corruption.
Thank you, Chief.
And I
What
can
do you
almost
think?
guarantee you the feds are still watching this. They're
What do you think, Attorney
still
Steinbeck? Let
watching
him
this.
get in here, Chief. Let him respond now.
Yeah, I appreciate your service, Chief, and I totally agree with you that there's so many things that are disturbing on multiple different levels with this case. But this case, like I say, is not much outside the mainstream, as you can see. There's a lot of things like this can happen in different parts of America. It's just that they don't get the visibility and the viewership. So there are places that do things by the book. I'm not saying every type of prosecution office this way, but there is a lot of places where there is rampant politics, corruption, insider dealings, and unless you're well connected, you can get trampled on and crushed. And those that do have the connections will be isolated and protected and allowed to continue on with their lives, doing more of the same.
Great points. Great call. Please call again, Chief. That was a good call. I really appreciate it. We also have Jeremy in the green room. I think I know Jeremy. I think it's Jeremy from Sacramento, maybe. Let's find out. And I like that Chief brought up Video Jesus too, because that she's been doing phenomenal work calling into the show, and just some of the stuff that she showed just recently was, I know that Alan Jackson was basically quoting her, it looked like, from her info that she provided on the show. So thank you so much, Chief. Let's see if Jeremy's here. Jeremy.
Hey guys,
Hey,
Hello.
Jeremy.
can you hear me
Are you
okay?
yeah, you can. Are you the one from Sacramento, or are you a different Jeremy?
Yep. Nope, that's me.
So what do you got for us tonight, Jeremy from Sacramento?
Well, first of all, I wanted to say hello to Carl. I been an Army reservist for 30 years, and so love seeing other military guys, and love what
Yeah.
you do. But I something I thought was hilarious today. Well, not hilarious, but hilarious. Of course, Alan Jackson made a fiery case, right? And Hank Brennan gets up and one of my favorite kids movies, Kung Fu Panda, the turtle master Oogway. Sometimes you meet your destiny on the road you take to avoid it. Well, Hank Brennan puts up these, hey, look, see, there's no trickery going on. Look at these Sallyport videos from other days. And of course, Alan Jackson says, wait a minute, timestamps in a different place. Now it's yellow instead of blue. What's going, it's like, trust me, we're not doing anything wrong. And then he, of course, shows his hand.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
What do you think? Did you catch any of that today, Carl, at all? The videos
Yes. Yeah.
craziness?
Yeah. I didn't see all of it, but from what I saw, I mean, it's, as I said earlier, I just don't trust Brennan. He's just trying to whitewash everything. No big deal what the prosecution's doing. It's never in bad faith, right? It's like there's multiple things that could still be out there, but we're trying. He went down there to police station and found some other videos that he turned over the next day. So I mean, he's doing what he's supposed to be doing, but it's like it's just so much a disgrace to see law enforcement having videos that self-destruct after 30 days are written over and whatnot. When just like the retired trooper was saying, they should have been all over that tail light, taking photographs, and they're saying that's a proof that vehicle is the thing that took out John O'Keefe. Well, really, you're not going to do anything to preserve that as evidence and do it right away, so there's no tampering, so the tow truck driver couldn't do something with it to take it out or anything of that nature. I mean, what if pieces would have fallen out because there's a blizzard going on and they'd have been lost on the way back to the police station and stuff like that? So, and I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but I think taking it back to Canton they bypassed other localities where they could have brought that to be processed. And with the bad weather and everything, why would they bring it all the way there? It just seems too convenient, right?
No doubt. Like, why would they bring it there? Good question. When they have their own facilities, the state police.
Right.
We have someone that says there's a daughter of mass law enforcement officer in the green room trying to bring her up, but she has to. You have to turn on your microphone. That's what we're getting a notice that we can't bring you up unless you turn on your microphone. So I hope you do turn on the mic so we can bring you up. Oh, here she goes. Turn on the mic. How you doing tonight?
Good. How are you guys?
Good.
Good.
I came on to say now my dad is actually long retired, but I grew up in mass law enforcement. A little ways away from Canton, but still. He loved the job to death. We grew up knowing that. What he hated was the red tape and corruption that he saw behind the scenes. He actually ended up leaving the job he loved years later because he could no longer take it. He was not going to be a part of it. And I just find it sad. And watching this case, and my dad, God rest his soul, because he is no longer here. But he said that to us. He believed in justice. He believed in the system. He believed in it all. But watching what would happen and watching this case brought it all back to me. Like how much he knew what went on here. And it's sad, to see it. And this is put out to the world for everybody else to see. We only knew it from behind the scenes from what he knew, And this case is just out of control. It's out of control how anybody can look at this case from any aspect and say it should be in court is crazy to me. I don't even know how else to put it,
Absolutely. It's Carl, you mentioned it earlier. It's political. The justice system could be very political.
Yes, and that's what my dad hated the most. He didn't want the political. He was sick of seeing, now mind you, I'm older than a lot of viewers on here, but he hated seeing, you know, the kid getting caught with a joint in his pocket and getting the book thrown at him because he didn't know how to play the system, and the drug dealer walking out of court because he knew how to play the system. You know, it was just those types of things, and that's what we grew up learning. You know, my brother and I, and it's just sad to see how true it still is. How true the system can be manipulated and thrown at somebody, and if Karen didn't have the courage to fight back, like a lot of us didn't have the money, didn't have the stamina, and if you're a good citizen and you're being told you can go to jail for 20 years, sometimes you're going to take a deal because you think that's your best way out of anything, you know, and she didn't do that, and good for her, you know, because this case doesn't prove, because even if you believe she did it, the case doesn't prove it, you know?
Right.
Thank you for calling tonight.
Right. That's a good point. I want to, if I could take a moment. You know, the thing is, in criminal law and the justice system here in America, proof beyond a reasonable doubt, you can actually believe and completely be convinced they got the right person. This person absolutely did it. But if there's not evidence there to back that up, that belief, it's just more your instinct and hunch. We don't convict on instincts and hunches and beliefs without something to back it up. And so that's why it's so critical that we do have the standard of proof in America, that we don't change it. We do keep jury trials. You know, jury trials are very rare in the rest of the world. Most governments, they trust their government leaders and appointed judges to decide people's fate. Here in America, we have the viewpoint that the public is the best decider of truth and justice, not judges, right? Because judges can be corrupted and influenced. They can be part of the system that works itself against the general citizenry. Innocent people can get swept up in the corruption racket, right? So that's why we have, I call always the jury is the equalizer. So no matter the politics going on with the police, the law enforcement, you have the jury as the equalizer, and you as an attorney just got to lay out the cards before the jury so they can see that. And most times, and from my experience, most times they always get it right. It's very rare not to have justice happen. So here we just had, for example, in Karen's, we had the which I thought was a really weird jury instruction to begin with, and then nobody asked the question of like, well, where are you at on counts 1? Where are you at on count 2? Where are you at on count 3? It was just sort of like a jumbled up confusion bomb. And also think about it this way, Mike, the type of description that this foreman used to describe their impasse. I mean, it sounds like it's written by a law professor or somebody that did Google searches on case law, right? So it doesn't seem like this person was not looking for outside sources to come up with his explanation. So that too just really reeks
Sus.
and
Yeah,
makes
very
you just
sus.
go like, what's going
Yeah.
on back there with this jury
Yeah.
foreman?
That's the whole thing. That's comes back to the jury tampering. Who knows really what's going on back there? So wild. We have another caller. I think this is going to be our last one. I'm going to unmute her. Hopefully, she's going to have to unmute yourself. Well, let me unmute you. Mandy, bring up Mandy. Mandy, what do you have for us tonight?
Hi, just a comment. I felt I've been a civil litigator for a few years now. I am a huge proponent of our justice system. I believe in it so much. Between Karen Reed and Delphi, I am like questioning my entire life. The things that are going on is just absolutely insane, and I'm just, how are we, you know, not just those of us that are in the legal profession, but in general, how are so many people in that courtroom and just in that, you know, the prosecution team, the judge, everybody, how they're just nothing to see here. And it's just, anyways, I'm going to go on a rant, but I just want, this is the first time that I've ever felt compelled to really speak up because, you know, I was watching with Melanie Little today and I was just, she was getting angry and I'm getting angry. And I mean, I had to step away when Breenan was talking because just awful. But I need to take some notes from AJ and learn how to, because I would have gone off. I can say I'm not that good of a lawyer. I would have gone off. I don't, not really a question, but
Comment. I love it. What do you think, Attorney Steinbeck?
Well, yeah, it is a sad commentary on the state of justice in Massachusetts, and it's like I said in the beginning of this show tonight, they're not going to back off. I mean, they're going to keep driving this home that she did it. They'll prop up whatever witness they got. They'll circle the wagons around, and they just want to package this thing as a nice little clean cut package showing that Karen is the guilty party. It's only Karen. Everything else is lies, deception, and so all their deceptions, lies, and absolute incompetence, and never treating this as a crime to begin with, is all just she did it. Lock her up, right? And so this is like really small town corrupt kind of justice, but you know, this kind of stuff can happen many places across America, so it's not isolated. I still do believe, though, I mean, we do have the best justice system in the world because of the fact that we have the jury as a check and balance against it. Okay, that is the last stopgap measure that we have that most countries in the world do not have. And so this jury, I trust in the jury system. If you get the right lawyers involved and they do the right questions, they present the right facts before the jury, and then they see how they respond to their questions posed. And what I do is I have a discussion with the juries. I just don't ask questions and ask them to raise their hand and not. I actually have one-on-one dialogue with jurors as much as I can to really get a feel for, do I trust this person to do the right thing or not? Do they have preconceived biases and judgments against the defendant just by virtue of them sitting at the defense counsel table? So by and large, you do the system the way it's supposed to be done, and somebody like Karen is not going to be convicted, okay? So in the end, is it an ugly process to get there? Absolutely. But you know what? These people are they're being accountable in the public eye, at least, right? In the court of public opinion now. So we don't have a vote on the jury, but you know what? We can speak truth to what's going on, and this is not right the way things are being handled there. So you coming on tonight is another example. You're speaking out. You're also an attorney. You're saying this is disgusting, and we as American citizens deserve better than this, right? So that's how America was formed, by dissent. People saying, you know what? This is wrong. We're being treated unfairly. Enough is enough. So
yeah, I completely agree with you. And I do believe that, you know, God forbid something happens and she is just convicted. I know that ultimately it will be fixed because, you know, we have all this, you know, in place, but I've never really thought about how much money it takes for these defendants until this trial. And this is the first one that has ever truly opened my eyes up to how, like, Karen Reed is in a really great position, and I'm really super happy for her, but not everybody is. So, I mean, I think that's just what kind of bothers me, is I know in my heart that this particular case will end up with the right verdict or outcome, what have you. But in general, if this is what they're doing on a high profile case, you know, what are they doing? So anyway,
right. If Karen didn't have, yeah, just to follow up on that, if Karen didn't have money and we didn't have video going on, live stream of the courtroom, we didn't have channels like Mike's and others that cover this case, the public would not even know about this. They could just get away with it and just, you know, roll her up and put her in a coffin and be done with her and send her away to prison. And it's the same old, on to the next case. So they're going to have to, you know, look at Trooper Proctor. If it wasn't for the media attention, the FBI wouldn't have gotten involved in this, right? So we would have never seen Trooper Proctor's text messages those disgusting text messages. So good things are coming out through the public discussion of this. And like they say, sunshine is the best sterilizer of corruption. So that's what everyone's doing here.
That's what we're doing. We're trying to air it out. Thank you so much for calling,
Thank
Mandy.
you.
Great call tonight. Good way to end the show. Thank you so much. Please call again. We had some great calls. We got Chief. We had Mexico City. We had the retired highway patrol from North Carolina. We had a daughter of a Massachusetts law enforcement. It was just one great caller. Jeremy, another great caller. Phenomenal calls. Everyone was great tonight. I want to make sure I get the super chats. We do have to wrap it up. Let's just read the last few super chats here. Kim says, my favorite attorney, Carl. Great to see here. Please discuss only 1.5 hours on closing arguments. And I think their hands were tied in jury selection. Thank you. Thank you, Kim. You're her favorite attorney, Carl. I heard a little shy. That was a little chuckle. A few weeks before John O'Keefe and Braintree, a murder occurred in the street. Mass State Police called, CSI evidence, markers, all of it. Buchanan and Proctor were there. They searched the home behind where guy was killed.
Wow.
Shake my head. So I mean, there's the right. I mean, that guy wasn't even a police officer, right? They did that.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
that's
that's what I've said, Mike. It's like it's a disgrace the way they're handling the case in terms of we've been talking all tonight about how, as to Karen Reed, but what it really also is paramount, which is it's a disgrace the way they're handling the survivors of John O'Keefe. They're just it's a disgrace to him personally as well, the way they're handling this case. They didn't ever treat him as a victim. And so it's an absolute disgrace and a travesty. And it's going to continue to pick up speed and momentum and in viewership of how bad things can really get in criminal cases here in Massachusetts. So that's the one good thing about it. In the end, truth is going to come out, but the ugly process to get there is going to be really eye-opening for folks. And that's the more people we have seeing the ugly side of justice, the injustice of it, the better informed we can be, and the more we can be all collectively working to speak out about the injustices, right?
definitely. I hope everyone follows Carl tonight. We got him pinned in the chat. We have his website as well as his YouTube. Please make sure you follow him on YouTube as well. We had a few questions about your military experience because I know you've had quite a bit of military experience. People were asking about it tonight. They're interested in it. Do you mind talking about it at all?
Well,
Quickly, maybe.
I mean, I guess probably the easiest thing to do is if you go to my website, steinbecklaw.org. It sort of gives I give sort of a bio of different stuff I've done in the military, but I've done a lot of different stuff, not just crim law, and a lot of it always involves politics. I sort of consider myself somebody very seasoned and experienced of how politics works, and I use that to my advantage when I was a defense attorney in the military because I would know how to counteract politics of cases to get stuff done the right way. So, things like Karen's case, I would just basically look at it from the political standpoint, the corruption standpoint, and use that as a way to underscore how I need to convince the jury that they need to keep eyes open on stuff that's being spoon-fed to them and is not credible to them. And they're just, there's so many jurors that just think because the prosecutor, the state attorney, or the district attorney's office is presenting testimony that must be the truth, right? So you really got to get jurors that don't buy into that notion. And so if you can't get those kind of people off the jury, and like I said, I used to have, for example, when I mentioned recovered alcoholics, I had an actual cousin of mine when I was young and trying cases as a public defender outside the military because I had a break in service, and and I used to run cases by him. Hey, I got this upcoming jury trial. This is my theory of the case, blah, blah. What do you think about it? And every single time he gave me indicators of why he thought my client should be convicted and would be convicted of him. I tried to give it neutral both sides. I said, here's what the prosecution is going to be arguing. Here's what I'm going to be arguing. Every single time he sided with the prosecution, right? He just had this really fixated view that my client had been guilty. There's no way that they shouldn't be found guilty. And every single time they were found not guilty. So I just learned from that. It's like, do not have a recovered alcoholic
certain
on there.
people.
Because you always got, there's most cases, think about it, Mike, most cases there's something involving alcohol involved when there's a fight going on, a shooting going on, alcohol and or drugs. And so if you have people that are very much intolerant of that because they've been harmed by it themselves, you can't have people like that on the jury. So as a defense counsel, because they just, and I've also heard stories about how they, flip a jury to believe somebody is guilty when there was no evidence there. It was a case like Karen's where there was no evidence, and they got the 10 other jurors to completely agree with him that there's stuff outside the jury must be going on because this and this wasn't presented, and they completely bamboozled the other 10 into voting guilty. And so anyway, those are a couple of data points I can share with you why, it is very important to do jury selection the right way and to do take it serious and know what you're doing. Because if you don't know what you're doing, you can botch up an otherwise winnable case.
So I want to thank you so much for being here tonight. You brought up some great points, especially about that jury selection, about the reformed alcoholics. I could totally see that. I know a few friends and family that are very similar. They always think they're guilty. They always think the person's guilty. It's true. Do you have any final thoughts? Anything else you want to share? Any upcoming shows you're doing on your channel? Anything you want to talk about before we get going here?
No, I'm not really much into PR, but thanks for the PR you've done for me. And I mean, I'm covering some more stuff on the Markel case. I'll probably do a live stream Friday night. And that case is another bizarre case, and it's completely different than this one. But they both cry out for justice, and things aren't being done the right way. So I just try to talk about it from a neutral standpoint, and if something's being done wrong, I speak out about it. And so I just like speaking out about from my experience what we can do to help improve justice. And so thanks for your efforts too, Mike, as well. I appreciate it, and glad to be on your show. So thank you.
I'm very happy to have you, and thank you for broadcasting on your channel as well. That means we get even more people watching tonight, which I like. And I want to thank everybody. Make sure, no matter where you're watching, that you subscribe to Carl if you haven't already. Yeah, I know a lot of you have already subscribed to him, but if you haven't, I always notice this in our algorithm too. Like half the audience comes back and watches, but they're not subscribed, and then you miss because you're not subscribed. So make sure you hit that subscription button for Carl tonight. Thank you so much, Attorney Carl Steinbeck, for being here again. Criminal defense, former prosecutor, military guy. Definitely support him. Thank you so much for your time tonight, Carl.
Thanks, Mike.
We're the Young Jurks, and thank you, everybody. I want to thank our moderators in the chat tonight. They've been posting all the links to steinbecklaw.org. They've been posting the links to his YouTube. They've been also posting the defense funds as well, and some of the other links for the Young Jurks. I want to thank them so much. So I see Scott McGinnis, Stephanie. We got so many. I said Stephanie. Sarah, excuse me. Sarah and Shakanhara. MJ. Yeah, Stephanie too. I'm getting a little confused. We do have a lot of mods. I want to thank all of our mods. Did I forget anyone? Jen. Thank you. MJ. I'm checking my dog. There's a lot going on over here tonight. Thank you so much for everyone for being here. I want to thank all the super chats tonight. Sherry D. I want to thank Kim. I want to thank, yes, and Sandor. Glamasus. The Petty Paralegal. Thank you so much. Thank you, Rosemary. Thank you, Mr. Monk's understudy. Thank you so much. AKA the cat lady. Thank you, Liana. I'll also get some super chats. I want to make sure I Venmos, excuse me. I got a Venmo today. I know I did. Diana W sent $25. She said, thanks. Thank you so much, Diana. Also, Sarah, one of our mods, Sarah and Shock and Horror, she said $20. She said to help offset postage for stickers. Yes, I spent over $50 on just stamps. Stamps. It's unbelievable. Over $50 because so many of you donated to the Karen Reed Defense Fund, and we sent out a bunch of stickers to the people who donated. Send a screen capture the other night. We raised over $2,000 for the Karen Reed Defense Fund in one show. That was amazing to see. I ran out of the stickers we had. I ordered new ones. If you didn't get the right stickers that you wanted, and you did get a shipment or a mailing from me, you can always email me back later next week. I should have new stickers. Let me know which stickers you didn't get because we did run out. I tried to send everyone a sticker. A lot of people got the Young Jerk stickers, but they didn't get the other ones, the 3Ms that we ran out of. So make sure you hit me up if you wanted those and you didn't get them. We're going to be doing much more of those fundraisers with the stickers. That was a lot of fun the other night. I want to thank everyone who kicked into the Karen Reed Defense Fund, donated directly to her on her fund. That was amazing the other night. I also want to thank Kyla M. She also sent $20 for the stamp fund too. She said, thank you for your excellent shows. It was amazing. And March 2nd, I also got $20 from Paula. She said to put towards stamp to send out stickers. You guys covered me. I think I got enough for the next round of stamps already. That's amazing. Didn't even ask for it, but you knew what I was doing. You contributed. I really appreciate that. Just checking the other account real quick. Cash App. I enjoyed all the phone calls tonight. That was great. People don't have to pay for the calls, and they get right through on the StreamYard. I want to thank Mark. Last night, he wanted to let us know that hankbrennan.com is now redirected to that free Karen Reed Defense Fund. Thank you so much for that as well. All right, I think I'm out of here. I think I got all the super chats up. Did I get this one up? Yes, I did. From Sherry D. She says, justice for Dan Markel. Love to Ruth, Bill, and Shelley. All right, I'm out of here. I'm not sure. Yeah, actually, tomorrow night. I think we're going to do a show tomorrow night and go over some of the video from today with Hank Brennan and Alan Jackson. It should be fun. And we maybe, I'm hoping that we do get some Aiden Carney video from today. It's possible. It might have got recorded. We tried to do it today live on the Zoom, but the court never turned on the audio. And I think that was on purpose. I think that they don't want to be transparent. They know that we're trying to stream it. So I'm hoping to get some video, tomorrow night. It will be one of both if we can do it tomorrow night, Thursday night. So check back. Make sure you subscribe to the Young Jerks. And also make sure you subscribe to Carl Steinbeck. And we'll see you tomorrow night. Friday, I'm taking off. I'm going to have one night off Friday this week. So probably do a show Thursday night and then Saturday and maybe Sunday. So make sure you subscribe. We've got a lot more guests upcoming. I want to thank attorney Carl Steinbeck for being here. Make sure you subscribe and follow him. He's phenomenal. He was so good tonight. Thank you, everyone watching. We'll see you next time. Have a great night.